What is going on, fight fans, Degens? We are back. Fight night here for UFC 284, Perth, Australia. UFC making their return to Australia since pre-COVID, and this card is headlined by Islam Makhachev versus Alex Volkanovski. Boys, how we doing? Sorry that we missed last week, everyone. We were feeling under the weather, some scheduling conflicts, so we're unable to get an episode out there for that, amazing 10 p.m. Eastern start card there that went until 4 a.m., but we're back here for the most important one, the pay-per-views, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, man. Just happy to be here, guys. It's just such a pleasure to be with you guys, break down these fights. And, taking that week off last week just felt like there was a missing void, having that, given that we had fights and didn't have an episode. But, hey, we're back in a big way here, and we're certainly going to make it rain this weekend.
Yeah, no episode, but, we were still in the Discord dropping a couple plays, dropping some. I know I was on Spivak inside the distance, which would hit nicely. I know I was on Tyra as well, which seems to be our cash cow. But for sure, nice to be talking a pay-per-view this week, and got some interesting takes, I think, for the squad today.
Sir.
Yeah, definitely some interesting fights. And before we get into that, we do want to announce that if you haven't heard about SoBet, right? They polled their community. They asked them what sport felt underrepresented. Which one are they yearning for? And the majority answer was MMA. So with that, we're pleased to announce that you can find Fight Night on SoBet, giving out our picks there. So make sure you sign up with the link in our bio on this video, create an account, and make sure you follow Fight Night for all our plays from here moving forward. We're very excited to partner up with them. We're very excited to be in the community that is, asking for UFC content. We're here to provide it for them, boys. I know I'm excited for it. You guys are excited for it, and can't wait to get this rolling.
Yeah, man, it's a really exciting feeling. We've been trekking along with Fight Night for probably about 6, 7, 8 months now, and this is the first official partnership, between Fight Night and another organization. So it's really exciting stuff for the three of us. To continue to expand, grow, and at the end of the day, make people money. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no doubt. It gives us an opportunity for those that aren't in the Discord to get some exposure to Fight Night and see some of our plays. And I mean, certainly, again, nothing will beat being in the Discord come Fight Night, because I think there's a lot of live plays and live takes that a lot of us drop. But gives you some nice exposure to what we're all about. And if you're interested at that point, feel free to jump in the Discord where the real sharks are making takes.
Yeah, and it's not just us on SoBet, right? There's a whole litany. It's a roster of people like us that give picks, provide winning picks over the long run. So you're going to get more than just us. You're going to get sports from football, basketball, baseball coming up. So very excited to announce that and catch our first plays on there for this weekend's pay-per-view card when we post them. But with that being said, it's time to move on to the card itself. Starting off the main event here, we have Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifield. We have an Australian headlining here for the main card in Perth. And, Jimmy Crute hasn't fought in a little bit over a year, had some knee trouble. Last fight, though, fought Jamal Hill. First round knockout he suffered. But it is worth noting he was minus 175 going into that fight, right? And as we all know, Jamal Hill currently is the light heavyweight champion. Alonzo Menifield, has done his job coming into this one, coming off a few wins. A lot to be said about the opponents those wins came against, right? But nonetheless, we find this matchup marked off here. Jimmy Crute currently around minus 195. Come back on Alonzo Menifield plus 165. Boys, how you feeling about this one? I know you spoke about it briefly yesterday, but want to hear your take.
Yeah, man, this is an interesting fight. You have a guy in Alonzo Menifield who we all know what his IQ is, what his MO is, right? I mean, he's that one hitter guy. He carries a massive amount of strength. He's got that big power, but he doesn't necessarily have the volume. He doesn't necessarily have the technical ability. He really does rely a lot on his athleticism, to get the job done. With that said, he is 6-3 in the UFC, so he is finding a will to find a way. But a guy in Jimmy Crute, he's coming off a 14-month layoff. He's coming off, a full knee construction surgery. But the man has a very solid wrestling base. I think that he's got a very well-rounded mixed martial arts game. I think that he's a good striker. He's good on the ground. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he is the only person to ever submit Paul Craig, which is a really interesting feat. So, I just, given the fact that Crute has the ability to take this to the mat and negate that power right off the jump, I firmly expect Menifield to get finished here. Jimmy Crute does have a wide array of skill in finishing the fight. And if I'm not mistaken, he's finished almost every fight in the UFC that he's had. So Yeah, I love Jimmy Crute here. I think it's a pretty decent number. Of course, there's a little bit of hesitancy, of course, coming off the knockout to Jamal Hill with the layoff, with the surgery, and of course facing a guy in Alonzo who can shut your lights out any moment in time. But I do believe that Jimmy Crute's can come in here with a quality game plan, get this to the mat and find a submission early.
Yeah, Jimmy Crute, I think, the line is about right here. He's sitting at around minus 200. And I think it's warranted. Obviously losing to Jamal Hill, who, the now champ in the division, I think doesn't necessarily, take down his stock in any way. He got hit clean by Jamal. Jamal beat him to the punch, and he did what he's been doing to everybody, and that's finishing fighters. And Crute, I think before that, you want to look at his fight against Anthony Smith. A bit of a tricky fight for him. I think, kind of rewatching that, he was getting, pieced up with Anthony Smith's jab early on in the round. He was landing some good low kicks, and then Anthony Smith just lands the most perfect leg kick to just completely, shut off his nerve. And what I found really interesting is that, even with that happening, being on one leg, Crute was able to I won't say dominate, but he was able to win the position battle in the last minute of that round. When he went down, immediately shot in for a double leg. And Anthony Smith is no slouch on the ground, right? He's a legit black belt. So, just goes to show the strength in Crute's grappling game. I think if he leans on that a little bit more here, rather than stand and bang with Menifield, who, again, pure power, really that athlete type builds. The guy packs a lot of muscle, and with that, a lot of power in his punches for sure. But I think, one thing's for sure is that we've seen him, if there was a hole in his game, it has come on the grappling side. He lost to Will Knight, who is by no means a world beater in the grappling department. We saw him get repeatedly taken down by, some of the worst outside hook takedowns that I've ever seen. So, again, before that, you look at his fight versus Ed Herman. I think he starts Herman early. That fight probably should have been stopped, but as the fight went on, Herman was actually picking up steam, and it was a lot closer than it should have been. So, all this to say is that I think Crute, this is a great bounce back spot for him. It's going to be in his backyard. I think, if he, plays this a little bit more conservative and looks to get this to the ground, if he can get Menifield off his back, I think he can look for a submission and probably finish this fight. I think on the feet, certainly a little bit more risky for him. Crute's stand up is, I think he's still improving. Certainly, when Anthony Smith is piecing you up with a jab, I mean, not to take anything away from Smith, but not the best striker out there in the division. So I think probably a little bit more work to do. Certainly his chin getting knocked out against Jamal Hill his last fight. Probably doesn't want to take that kind of damage again. So easiest path to take for Crute is take this to the mat. And I think he'll hold a decisive advantage there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when I'm looking at this fight, there's two things that stand out, right? One of which is that Jimmy Crute, 9 years younger than Alonzo Menifield, who is 35 years old. And the other factor is that, he has the grappling upside. I know, Dan, you touched on it. Kev, you did too. It feels like his last two fights, Jimmy Crute a little bit fell in love with his striking, coming off that big knockout win over Modestas Bukauskas. Goes into that Anthony Smith fight, first half of that round takes place on the feet. As Dan mentioned, he got hit with that leg kick that just completely shut down the nerve in his leg, and still was able to land the takedown, remain on top, retain top control throughout the last 2 minutes or so in that round. Tough ass guy, right? Tried fighting through it anyway. He was pissed when the ref stopped it. And that Jamal Hill fight, try standing with Jamal, as I mentioned before, light heavyweight champion. And it was just a matter of him being beat to the punch, like Dan said. Jamal was just a little bit faster than him on the exchange, caught him perfectly in the eye. His eye welled up immediately. And, I think if Jimmy Crute could just stick to his grappling, which, that's his strength. That's the way that he's going to win fights moving forward in this division. And, if he sticks to that, I think he has such a vast advantage on the mat. He's always hunting for a submission. I think he gets it in this spot. Currently sitting around like plus 225 to plus 250, depending on what book. And I would definitely take a stab on that for Jimmy Crute in this spot.
Yeah, and worth noting that Jimmy Crute has a 75% takedown accuracy. So when he's trying to take that opponent to the ground, it's super efficient. But you imagine, in Jimmy Crute's corner, right? What's the game plan, right? You're going against his high power puncher, right? What do you got to do? Take him to the mat. So if he doesn't follow that, if he stands for those first 5 minutes in that first round, I think that he's going to get knocked out. But if he comes in here with that quality game plan, I think he's going to make this look super easy.
Yeah, I mean, even so, if this fight, for whatever reason, takes place on the feet, right, I think that Alonzo Menifield just isn't that technical where it's going to be a disadvantage for Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute does have good leg kicks of his own, and he does throw with power. We saw what he did to Bukowskis. Menifield got dropped by William Knight in that fight. And, I think it could be a case where Crute, like you mentioned, 75% takedown defense. If he goes for an aggressive grappling style approach, just rinse and repeat takedowns, almost like we saw last Saturday night with Derek Lewis, just constantly taking down. It just wears on these bigger guys, especially someone as muscular as Menifield. And I think, honestly, I believe Jimmy Crute's game plan will be grappling heavy. And if that's the case, minus 195 is going to look like minus 400.
I'm with it.
But nothing else to add on this fight. We can move on to the heavyweights of the pay-per-view. It's not a pay-per-view card unless there's a sloppy heavyweight fight that made its way to the main card here. And we have Justin Tafa, another Australian native around that area, taking on Parker Porter. This line is minus 125 in the Tafa favor, plus 105 on the Porter side. Heavyweight fights are not my strength. I'm open about that. I think it's the only division where I'm negative accuracy. I think I was at like 48% picking heavyweight fights. So it's tough for me to find a side here. I think Justin Tafa, when he puts it all together, he's a better fighter than Parker Porter. But Parker Porter, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that he comes into this one. He just holds Tafa against the fence, maybe gets a takedown, and just kind of wears on Tafa until he gasses out. I mean, other than that, I don't see a real danger that he possesses that comes back at Tafa. I think Tafa, if he's in his element, he could move forward. He could disregard Porter's striking coming back to him and land bombs of his own. If I was forced to pick a side here, I'd probably go with Tafa by knockout. I think that, like I said, if he's aggressive and he's throwing bombs, disregarding the power of Porter coming back at him, stuffs a takedown attempt or two, gets off the cage, like there's no other way that Porter wins this fight. So I'd have to lean Tafa in this spot, but being that I'm not, great with heavyweights, I'll probably end up staying off.
Yeah. What I found funny about this fight, I can't believe Justin Tafa is 29. The guy looks like he's 40. It's not much to say about this fight. I think Tafa's really only win condition is the knockout. And, we've seen Porter get knocked out, but it seems like his sort of Achilles heel are guys that, beat him with speed and athleticism. And you're not necessarily getting that with Tafa. What you get with Tafa is a heavy, heavy-handed, heavy leg kicks. And again, I think from an experience standpoint, you got to lean Parker Porter here, right? He's more professional fights. I think he's been slightly more active. I think before his last fight, Tafa has only had a couple fights in the last couple of years, both against the bottom feeding competition of the heavyweight. So I think tough to say. I think a lot of people are gonna, because it's a heavyweight fight, assume that there's a finish. But I actually think that this one can go the distance. I really do. I think that Porter's durability is going to be just because Tafa's not really a volume guy. I think he looks to land that big punch, and I think Porter has been able to show some durability. I think, like I said, where he tends to falter is against smaller, quicker heavyweights that are either slick on the ground or quick hands. I don't see Tafa as having either of those. So I think that we'll see a lot of fighting up against the fence from both guys. I think it'll be a sloppy one. And I actually like this to go all three. So I'm looking at Bet365 now, fight to go the distance around like plus 137. I actually like that quite a bit. The over 1.5 is minus 175, which for me seems like a gift because I just barring a one shot kind of Hail Mary from Tafa, I don't really see how this fight ends in the first in the first of a round and a half. So. No real side. I think you put a gun to my head. I'm probably going to lean Porter just because I think the hometown fighters tend to get a little bit more love than they should. Tafa is by no means a world beater. His last win came against an undersized Henry Hunsucker, and before that, he lost to my boy Jared Vandera. So, that says a lot. I think a lot of people don't give Parker Porter the kind of credit that he deserves, and he's beaten shit heavyweights, but he's beaten them. So I think that it's going to be a lackluster fight. Love the over 1.5, and I think this goes the distance.
Man, great breakdowns. And to be quite frank, you guys took like all the notes that I had, all the thoughts that I had, man. Like I genuinely believe that this goes the distance. As a matter of fact, to take it a step further, this fight to end via split decision at plus 800. I think that's incredible value between two guys that really don't possess the technical ability to knock someone out clean often. I think that Justin Tafa probably packs a heavier punch, where a guy in Parker Porter really relies on that volume. I mean, he's landing over 6.5 strikes per minute, which is absolutely insane for the heavyweight division. As a matter of fact, when he fought Chase Sherman in that third round, he landed 71 significant strikes. So I have no doubt that in regards to the cardio, in regards to the volume, that Parker Porter has it. I think that we could see that scenario where, we see a lot of hugging here, not much a distance, closing that range. Fun fact, Parker Porter got knocked out by John Jones 15 years ago in 2008 on the regional scene. Kind of a fun fact there. But, look, both guys are super scrappy. I expect, there to be violence, but I just don't think that a finish is going to come early. Both these guys really are still at the bottom of the feeders of the heavyweights, man. Nothing too impressive. And, I really like this fight to go the distance as well, Dan. And I do believe that both guys are going to have their moments in this fight. Both guys are going to land. And I think we could see a very greasy split decision. And at plus 800, I'm certainly willing to take a stab at that.
800 is actually a pretty good price on that. I don't hate that. I do think that it's not fair to kind of bring up the Vandera angle, as much as we clown on him. But, the guy's way bigger than Justin Tafa, right? He's way taller, has a way longer reach. That's not Parker Porter. They're very identically sized. And so getting inside the distance won't be a big problem for Justin Tafa here like it was against Jared Vandera. But, I think, honestly, if you're looking at it like Parker Porter by decisions to play, if you really like him, and Justin Tafa by knockout if you like him. I don't know if there's a way to play both for plus money. I'm not sure what the prop odds are, but if Porter does somehow find a finish, Kev, it's like you said, it's due to volume. It's going to come late in the fight, probably in the third round, something of that matter. And if Tafa finds it's going to be in the first round or early second. So pretty black and white how it's going to go if it goes one person's way. But it's just a tough one to cap. It really is. It's just low level heavyweights. Anything can happen. High variance.
Yeah. And I mentioned this to you guys earlier, the way Parker Porter fights defensively, he does have really good head movement for a big dude. And, he's not the heavyweight that's going to stick out his head and land, get landed on by a big bomb. So this should be a fun one. Of course, Tafa is coming off of a head kick knockout. So surely he's probably coming in with a little bit of hunger, a little bit of momentum here in this spot. But man, it's like for a guy making, with his 9th ever MMA debut versus a guy who made his first debut in like 2006, I have a little bit of hesitancy, hammering either side, to be quite frank. So love the overs here, and let's rock and roll.
Yeah, for sure. And we have so many spots in this card, right? It's not, you don't need to force a bet, right? Just because it's on the main card, it's a heavy, you don't need to force it. If you're not confident in it, just move on to the next one. And we'll move on to the next one here for you guys. And that's Jack Della Madalena, a lot of people's fighter of the year of 2022. Taking on Randy Rude Boy Brown. This line, very surprising, right? JDM currently minus 320. And I believe the comeback on Randy Brown is somewhere around plus 185. Plus 280. So it's definitely wide. I know I mentioned this to you guys last night that, in my opinion, this is a true coin flip of a fight, minus 110 on either side. Obviously, Jack Della Madalena has a ton of momentum coming into this bout. 3 fights in the UFC. His first 3 fights in the UFC came in 2022. All ended by first round knockout. And, along the way, people had been betting him. It's not like he was knocking people out as an underdog or knocking them out when everyone was on the other side. People have been cashing in on Jack Della Madalena all of 2022. So to me, that kind of explains why this line is as wide as it is. Obviously, the fight's taking place in Australia, where Jack Della Madalena is from. As I mentioned, a lot of the market has been cashing on Madalena coming into this, whereas Randy Brown, on the other hand, a lot of people bet opposite of him. I know in the Chaos Williams fight, about like 70% of bets came in on Chaos. Randy went on to win that one by decision. But one interesting note here that I made was in terms of the line, like I mentioned, minus 320 on JDM, Jack Della Madalena. When he fought Pete Rodriguez last year, he was a minus 375 favorite, which is only a 2.5% difference of probability. So Pete Rodriguez minus 375, who is 5'9" with a 71-inch reach, right? Now he's fighting Randy Brown, who's been in the UFC for a long time. Mind you, Pete Rodriguez came on that fight less than a week notice, first fight in the UFC. Randy Brown is a UFC veteran. He is beaten big names, as I mentioned, Chaos Williams. He beat Francisco Trinaldo last time out. But not only that, he's 6'3" with a 78-inch reach. Like, he is so much bigger than Jack Della Madalena, who I believe is like 6 foot with maybe or he's like 5'11" with like a 73-inch reach. So, there's a huge size advantage in Randy Brown's favor. And to label this fight at minus 320 to me is just a little bit ludicrous, right? I mean, he's a veteran. He's a great striker. He has the grappling advantage, Kev, which I know you're going to chomp at the bit to get at in a little bit. But at this price, I mean, it's virtually impossible to play Jack Della Madalena here. I really like him. I think he's a great prospect. But as I mentioned, this is a coin flip of a fight, minus 110 on either side. And you have the size advantage, Randy Brown, the experience advantage, Randy Brown. And, we'll talk about that Ramazan Amia fight, right? That Jack Della Madalena got a first-round knockout in, to his credit. But he was trapped in a submission that was pretty tight. It was pretty close to getting finished there for a little bit. And not only that, earlier in the fight, he had a little bit of distance trouble against him, which I found interesting because all his punches were coming up short for like the first 2.5 minutes of that fight. And against someone like Randy Brown, who I mentioned is so much bigger, it's just going to exacerbate that problem even more so. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation. I'm not saying Randy Brown wins this fight majority of the time, but he's winning it way more than the 22% that Vegas is giving him.
Yeah, man. And for the record, Snoopy just came in to greet me here during this breakdown here. So you know what that means. Maybe the dog is going to be barking here. But man, who doesn't love Jack Della Madalena, man? I mean, the dude made an absolute splash in 2022. Just so incredibly crisp. His hands, his boxing, his strength, his power, so incredibly sound and poised in there. Of course, you briefly mentioned that Ramazan Amiev sequence, which was a little bit uninspiring. I don't want to solely base his grappling defense, just on that moment. But a guy in Randy Brown making his 15th UFC, fight. This is no walk in the park for Jack Della Madalena, and the fact that he's over minus 350, it's truly disrespectful in my opinion to Randy Brown. I mean, the guy has truly evolved in the UFC. Sure, he's ate a couple L's along the way, but I mean, the dude has won 6 of his last 7. He's won 4 straight. I mean, this man is really on the cusp of breaking through. And if he can find a moment here to finish Jack Della Madalena, I mean, we can be talking about, a potential guy in the top 5, truly. I mean, Randy Brown has the skill. He's very well-rounded. He works behind a very good jab. He's got good boxing. Dan, I'll save the grappling for you, my man. But, look, I mean, he's got multiple submissions in the UFC. The line on DraftKings on the books, I think that is really off on the submission prop. It's right at 14-1. To take it a step further, get this: Randy Brown round 2 submission plus 4,000, round 3 plus 5,500. Like, I'm just scratching my head with that one because like Randy Brown has been there, done that. Like, he has gone deep in these rounds, and we could see a moment where maybe Randy Brown has an early moment in that first round. The bright lights, just get to Jack Della Madalena and Randy Brown takes over. But, I just think that the way Randy Brown has that length and that reach and the way he's able to utilize his physique, I think that it can cause Jack Della Madalena problems, especially if this goes to the mat. Even if we see a moment where, Jack knocks down Randy and Randy's on his back, I could still see a moment where Randy finds that unopportunistic submission that we've seen multiple times in the UFC. And, at a line like that, I'm certainly willing to take a shot. But man, the way Randy is going to, keep range in this fight with that jab and work behind that boxing, I do believe is going to frustrate Jack. I really do. And I feel very strongly that Randy Brown is going to come through this weekend as a plus 300 dog. And let's rock and roll. Randy Brown by submission late.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm ready to go that far and label Randy Brown as sort of the parlay buster of the card. I do think Della Madalena is the real deal. I think it's a good step up in competition for him. Clearly 2022 was, the year where they just sort of feed him scrubs and knockout after knockout. So I think that's a part of the reason why you see the line for what it is today. But, Randy Brown has been around. He's fought some stiff competition. And, at this point in his career, I mean, he's he's a veteran in the game. I mean, I think that he's really come into his own. He's had a few stumbles along the way, but, for the most part, he's actually a very intelligent fighter, fights behind his jab. And, I think that in this fight, for me, I'm probably going to be targeting overs. I think that we can very well see a 3-round war with Della Madalena coming out on top. If you look at his Contender Series fight against Angelusa, like Della Madalena was having some problem kind of managing the distance in those early rounds. And Angelusa has a very long reach, not as tall as Randy Brown, but fights behind his jab well, and I do see some similarities there. I think what we saw in that fight was in the later rounds, Madalena was able to pull away. I think that can probably, that'll probably happen here as well. Just because I think once he figures out sort of the distance and timing of Brown, I do think that he packs the bigger punch, probably a little bit more durable. And, Brown has been in some close fights. So I think he's one of these guys that he can fight to the level of his competition. Now, Della Madalena is very good. So that means we might be in for a barn burner here. But, the over 1.5 is sitting at -150. Fight to go the distance is +150. So I'm probably going to be laddering the 1.5, 2.5, and fight to go. I do think that this goes all three. With Madalena getting his hand raised, to say that Brown will get the submission here, I think is a little bit of a stretch. I mean, he has some submissions, but I just don't think that he'll be able to control Madalena to the point of submitting him. It's that's quite a tall ask. So yeah, I think I like the Della Madalena side. I don't like the price that they're putting, but I do think that this will turn into a nice battle here, and for it to go all three.
Yeah, and you see, I think we've seen from Randy Brown that sometimes he could be the slow starter, right? It takes him a while to find his groove, and he's one of those fighters that they enter a flow state, right? I feel like I mentioned that about Randy Brown on this show before, but like he gets into his groove, and that's when he's really dangerous. When he's finding his distance, he's utilizing, his defense well with his range, and he's landing jab, 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 1-2. And when he does that, it's just a beautiful sight to see. And I think him pairing up with Saif Saud at King's MMA has just done wonders for his career. We've seen it. Dan, you mentioned it. He's a very cerebral fighter. I mean, inside and outside the octagon, he's a very smart person and utilizes that game plan. I think that him and Saif Saud are a very good match. I like the overs. I think that that's a good look at this because we've seen Randy Brown, even against Chaos Williams, that one went the distance, right? But
Chaos is a knockout guy, right? I mean, he's usually a KO or bust type fighter. So
yeah, and Chaos is a little bigger than Jack Della Madalena. Chaos is 6 foot, 77-inch reach advantage. I stated before, JDM 5'11", 73-inch reach. So it's a more favorable matchup, I guess, for Randy Brown than Chaos Williams, if you want to put it that way. Chaos was a vet, in the UFC leading up into that fight. But to get back to the price a little bit, -325 here. Jack Della Madalena, mentioned before, Pete Rodriguez -375. That fight against Ramazan Amiev, JDM was -180, right? So it's kind of like this weird game you're playing, looking at these markets and how they're pricing JDM. But Randy Brown here, I think, is a great look. Kev, you might like this one. If you like this one with the overs too, split decision here is +750.
Oh, wow.
And we saw that Randy Brown split decision with Chaos Williams. His fight style kind of lends itself to interpretation, and judges could be swayed either way.
That's an interesting line. If you gave me a blindfold and asked me to guess, I'd probably lay +5, +550. And I think that's just so reliant on Jack Della Madalena landing the mark early. And like you guys have been saying, Randy just is so poised. He's so wise. Hey, if Jack Della Madalena comes in here and knocks out Randy in the first round, tip the hat, because this man could potentially be a future champion. You know what I'm saying? But man, I just think Randy Brown is a very difficult task, and I think he's going to utilize his reach very well here. Should be a fun one, and yeah, let's rock and roll, guys. Love me some Randy Brown.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that the last person to beat and finish Randy Brown was Vicente Luque, right? And that's when Luque was at his peak, going through absolutely everybody in that welterweight division. So unless JDM is that version of Luque, he very well could be. I mean, like I mentioned before, it's not a knock on JDM. I think he's a great fighter. He's shown us nothing but positive things throughout his short UFC career. It's just, where this price currently lays, it's tough to get there personally.
Yeah, and there's still like a slight unknown with Jack, right? I mean, we've only seen him knock guys out in the first round. Like, we haven't seen him face that adversity and respond, where we have seen that from Randy. And Randy did get knocked out by Nico Price, but I don't know if you guys remember that knockout. It was a very, very opportunistic knockout there. The way he had him like in like an arm triangle like lock, and he was just like landing elbows from bottom position. It was just a very, very wild and unique knockout. Point being is that you can't knock Randy Brown's durability in that situation. So yeah, this is a great fight, guys. And man, it would be astonishing if Jack Della Madalena does break through here, or Randy Brown, because again, he's on a tear right now, winning 6 of his last 7.
Yeah, definitely great matchmaking there. But without further ado, let's get into the first of our 2 title fights here. This one is for the interim belt in the featherweight division. Yair Rodriguez taking on Josh Emmett. Another one of those fights, where there's a decent age gap between the 2 fighters. Yair, obviously the young bull, 30 years old. Josh Emmett, he's reaching 38 years old at this point, right? Both these guys, 2 losses in the UFC, just impeccable, track records to this point. Both guys are very deserving of this opportunity. Currently, Yair Rodriguez minus 165. Comeback on Josh Emmett currently around plus 135, plus 140, depending on the book. Dan, I'm going to kick this one off to you first because I believe you're the dissenting opinion here between the 3 of us.
That's exactly where I like to be. Yeah, listen, I mean, I think that Josh Emmett doesn't get the credit that he deserves, and I'm here to give him his flowers. I mean, I think this is a guy that you look at his record. He's had, one hiccup getting flatlined by Jeremy Stevens, but outside that, I mean, the guy doesn't lose. He seems to find a way to win. I know that. You look back at his fight against, let's say, like Michael Johnson, where he was losing every minute of that fight until he lands the perfect shot. But, that's a testament to the kind of guy that he is. He doesn't count himself out. And, we've seen in the last year, fighters come from behind, losing fights, Alex Pereira, Leon Edwards, right? Guys that don't quit on themselves. And, that tells me that that's a guy that believes in himself, believes in his ability, and it's a guy that's going to fight for your money. I think that if you ask me who's the more marketable fighter, hands down it's Yair Rodriguez, right? Representing Mexico. I mean, they're opening a PI in Mexico City in the near future. Obviously, Brandon Moreno just winning the title, so Mexico is certainly on the come up, and. Obviously, I think there's some value in having another champion in that region. Having said that, I mean, I think that Rodriguez loses this fight. I think that his stock doesn't necessarily go down. The UFC likes his style. He has a fun and exciting style. And quite frankly, I mean, when this match was announced, it was a bit of a head scratcher for me, just because he goes from losing a 5-round decision to Max Holloway, where, people are saying, well, no one's really damaged Holloway the way that he has. I disagree with that. I think Volkanovski did way more damage in his last fight against Holloway. But at the same time, again, you win a fight from a freak injury, and then you're rewarded with a title fight. I just don't understand the logic. I feel like the UFC, just wanted to kind of put something together for this one. I feel like they couldn't resist Emmett any longer. I mean, the guy is pushing 38 at this point, and this is the fight of his life. And there's something to be said there. I think a guy that goes 5 rounds, 5 hard rounds with a guy like Calvin Kattar, who has some of the best boxing in the division. And it was a split decision, but I actually had him winning that fight 3 rounds to 2. Decisioning to Dan Ige, Burgos. These are all tough guys. And I just think that combine that with, the experience factor, the fact that, again, this is the fight of his life. For him, I think there's no losing here. He might retire if he loses. So I think if you want to ask me sort of in the grand scheme of things, what I think will happen. I mean, I think him winning this title serves up a next fight with Volkanovski after he loses to Islam. So that's, we're jumping ahead a little bit. I'll talk through why I like Islam, but I think Emmett here has certainly from a power perspective, I think he's going to be the harder hitter in there. I think at distance, contrary to what some may think, but Rodriguez doesn't necessarily do most of his damage at distance, and you would think he does with all like the flashy kicks that he throws, but it's actually more on the inside that he has more success. Combine that with the fact that Rodriguez has proven time and time again that he cannot stop a takedown. I think early on he'll be dangerous, but once the sweat starts to flow, he'll overextend himself. And Emmett is a team alpha male fighter. Wrestling is in their blood. I think if he can land the top position, I don't know if he'll be able to control for a full round, but I think he'll definitely be able to mix in takedowns more than Yair will. And again, he's got that ginger power, man. There's something to be said about that. This guy packs a punch, and I think the physicality of Emmett is going to play a factor here over 5 rounds. So I like Emmett. I think everyone is betting Yair here, and no one is giving this guy a chance. And I don't understand why. He's consistently cashed as an underdog, and I think at this price, I'm licking my chops. So I like Emmett here.
Yeah. To counterpoint the point on Josh Emmett cashing as an underdog, the market's been right on Yair Rodriguez, 7-0 as a favorite in the UFC. So every time they line this guy as a favorite, he gets the job done. Are we calling the win over Ortega a freak injury? I mean, did Yair not kind of cause that?
I mean, cause it, from what I remember, he kicked him in the shoulder, right? When they were sort of both on the ground. Ortega was on top, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
I mean, sure, I guess he caused it, but can you really say that he beat Ortega? I mean, that's really more like a freak injury, right? I mean, I don't see that as that fight was ended too early for me to draw any conclusion from that fight. So again, to like reward him and giving him an interim title shot for that, I mean, run it back. Let him beat Ortega for real.
Yeah, but who else is going to fight for the interim here? Like, if it's not him, who Arnold Allen?
Yeah, absolutely, Arnold Allen. 100%. He's been way, way more impressive. And again, but he just came off a win in a freak injury against. So let them fight each other. Yair versus Allen, like that would have been a fight. But then again, you can't deny Emmett at this point because he's done everything they asked of him. So I understand it. I don't agree with it, but yeah, I understand it. Now they've got Allen matched up with Holloway, so that's one that I'm looking forward to certainly. But yeah, I just that Ortega fight didn't really sit well with me, and I just I understand the logic, but not in agreement.
Yeah, I mean, up until that point, I thought he looked good. I know, obviously, we're talking about one round of footage; it doesn't mean the world. But from the sound of it, you're kind of painting Josh Emmett as one fight away from retirement. And I mean, if we've learned anything about this, right? I mean, I would steer as far away as I possibly could from those types of fighters. 38. With a loss could retire, rumors floating around that he's been pushing off surgery. But for me, that doesn't really come into play here. I just really think when you're looking at this situation, you have a fighter in Yair Rodriguez who's just about 8 years younger than Josh Emmett. He's taller than Josh Emmett. He's more versatile. He's faster than Josh Emmett. He has more tools in striking than Josh Emmett. He's more technical with his striking than Josh Emmett. It feels like everywhere that you could possibly cover this fight, he's better than Josh Emmett. Does Josh Emmett have a wrestling advantage? Yeah, he does. But if it gets to the mat, we've seen Yair is very active from the bottom. He is never stopping. He's going to wear you out. And, Josh Emmett's age he is not nearly as fluid and flexible as he once was. You could really see it in some of the footage. His movements are kind of herky-jerky. He's not a fighter I really am too impressed with at this point in his career. I think that, at his peak, he was a phenomenal fighter, ran through absolutely everybody that he went up against. But Yair Rodriguez, I think, just has him covered absolutely everywhere. I know you mentioned those kicks. Yair Rodriguez is like the Zohan out there with the angles that his kicks come up from, could catch you in the chin, on the side of your head. He has just so many tools here, and I feel like we're going to be able to experience and see them all come to fruition here against Josh Emmett, who's a relatively stationary target, right? He's not someone that's elusive, like I mentioned, at this point in his career. And, if he can't, work in any sort of movement, side-to-side head movement, this could be a stoppage win for Yair Rodriguez. I mean, this guy is very good. You could discount what he did against Max Holloway. I understand he lost the fight, but, he looked very good in that fight. I think if you're mentioning that Volk beat him better, you're talking about the number one pound-for-pound fighter, who's run through the featherweight division. That's who you're comparing him to, and I think that's good company to keep in this situation. The only two guys that have really done that to Max Holloway, at least at the featherweight division. So I really like Yair in this spot. You mentioned the Mexico angle. Him and Moreno going to be two Mexican champions, right, at featherweight and at flyweight. They're going to open up the UFC PI in Mexico. Hopefully Mexico City gets themselves a UFC pay-per-view event down there, headlined by both Mexican champions. I think it would be great for Mexico, great for the sport. I like Yair here a ton. I really do. I think he could finish Josh Emmett.
Yeah. Just before Kev jumps in, I mean, I think, ultimately the deciding factor in that Holloway fight were the takedowns. Not just that. I mean, you look at his fight against Jeremy Stephens. Towards the end of that fight, like there was a risk of him losing because he got put on his back. So I just think that if we see Yair get taken down, it's going to be kind of the same old song and dance here. I mean, no doubt, I think on the feet he's a more dynamic guy, but he's wild. And like I said, I do think that he overextends himself here and lands on his back. And then from there, I do think that Emmett's physicality is going to play a factor here. So I just think like, we know how Rodriguez loses fights. He loses fights the same way every time. So that's, I think, the risk in betting a guy like Rodriguez here. I'd rather take the dog money.
Yeah, man. Shoot. I mean, what is there to add? Josh Emmett is so incredibly tough. I mean, the dude tore his ACL in the first 30 seconds for Shane Burgos and came out with a win. When he fought Jeremy Stephens and got his lights knocked out and had multiple orbital fractures, he's came out and won 5 or 6 straight. So, clearly the man is extraordinarily has lots of perseverance and resiliency. One thing that I did notice about just Josh Emmett's track record is he's only had more than one takedown in one fight in his career. And, I get the MO and alpha male, team alpha male, the wrestling, this, that, and the other. But, Josh Emmett necessarily doesn't really show that skill in the octagon. And I think that it would really work to his advantage in this spot. Because I do believe that if this does stand on the feet for 25 minutes, Yair is going to pick away at him. I really do, with the kicks, with the punches, with the lightning fast speed, and just the accumulation of damage. I just think that Yair, just stabs more often than not. And gosh, I was rewatching that Korean Zombie fight, and it's really miraculous, because Korean Zombie would have won that fight, and in the last second at the buzzer, like you're talking about like a full court Hail Mary for the win. Upper elbow like knocks him out. It was like
epic.
Epic. Another fight that Rodriguez should have lost, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving Dan, you just gave credit to Josh Emmett for doing the same against Jeremy Stephens. So it's like you got to give credit to both.
Michael Johnson, you mean?
Michael Johnson, yeah, correct.
You're right for sure. I agree with that. I mean, he was getting pieced up on Michael Johnson. Johnson did what he does. I mean, I think though. Listen, Rodriguez, that shot that he landed,
that was crazy.
That doesn't happen. Like
that's like Paul Craig's submission over Ankalaev.
Like I know he won that fight, but he lost that fight. Like let's be real, right? So, but fair point, makes sense.
Yeah. Also, Kev, I want to back you up here a little bit. Dan's talking about WrestleMania on the Josh Emmett side. The guy has 1 takedown in his last 5 fights, so it's it's.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not what we've seen.
He's going to be there against a guy like Rodriguez who has no takedown defense.
And maybe it will be, but will Josh Emmett utilize that to his advantage? I guess
he's going to have to if that's his.
He is going to have to. He is going to have to. If this stands for 25 minutes, I firmly believe that either Josh Emmett is going to accumulate so much damage and get knocked out, or it's just going to be a 49-46 decision. One thing that I also noticed just by the numbers, Josh Emmett's striking accuracy is 37% as opposed to 45% on the Yair side. 37% is like well below the UFC average. And the way he strikes, I mean, he's not like consistently working behind a jab. He just has these like blitzes where he like overthrows. And I really think that Yair is going to expose it. He has super hard leg kicks. A guy in Josh Emmett who has had, full on, reconstructive knee surgery. I firmly believe that Yair is going to target that knee, man. And, I was back and forth this fight, early in the week, but I feel really good on the Yair side. Matt, you make a good point with the two Mexican champions. I think that would be very delightful. Time could potentially be running out, right? Because once Alexander Pantoja walks through the door, who knows if Moreno will be keeping that belt, but that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, no, I just think that Yair is going to accumulate a lot of damage in this spot. Josh Emmett, 37 years old. The best analogy I can think of it as is Josh Emmett's running up a mountain, to reach gold, and little does he know that there's a cliff, and he's just going to fall off a cliff here. And I think that Yair is going to get the job done decisively in this fight.
I'm with you, Kev, especially with the Pantoja thing.
Yeah, and it's like, look, man, like I hear what Dan is saying, with the wrestling acumen and this, that, and the other. But man, he utilize it, man. And look, maybe he proves us all wrong here, and he comes in here and starts wrestling right off the jump, because I think that's the best thing that Emmett can do in this spot. And a guy in Yair who doesn't really have a really good bottom strength, from the bottom down, half bottom down, his legs, his thighs, you'll get Josh Emmett, I'm sure that he can squat double of what Yair Rodriguez can squat, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think that if Emmett comes in here with a quality game plan and relies on that grappling, I think that he could expose Yair. But I just think, man, I just don't see that happening. I think that Yair does have a significant advantage with his hand speed, with the volume, landing in a good amount of damage, the leg kicks, being able to deter that lower body. So yeah, I just think Yair has a lot more tools in the shed on the feet, and for that reason, Yair is going to get the job done here.
What are the odds of this fight ending in a split decision? Do you have that?
If you gave me 15, 20 seconds, I bet you Matt's ahead of me though.
Yeah, it's plus 450, so it's not the best odd.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's viable. I mean, if you look, Vegas thinks this goes the distance as well, which makes sense. And I do think that, we could find ourselves in some form of a Jan Blachowicz, Ankalaev territory. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I think this is, it's definitely going to be a year early, and Emmett later on as Yair, kind of slows down a little bit. Again, you look at Yair and he tends to fade in fights. He tends to get taken down later on in fights. So is that going to happen here? I mean, I think that's, early on, he's going to be explosive, hard to hold. He's not afraid to get into the pocket. But we'll see. He's fought hard hitters before. But MMA math doesn't always work out, right? He beat Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens beat Josh Emmett, right? So you would think Yair would walk through him, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. If this one goes to a decision, it's the kind of style that lends itself to a split decision, right? Because you're going to have someone that has a power damage, gap on their side, and Emmett also with the grappling advantage versus mass accumulation versus Yair. And we, tend to see discrepancy on those types of scorecards, which one matters most or which one, accumulates the most damage. So if it goes a distance, I could definitely see a scenario for a split decision. But, man, I most likely see this, like Kev said, 49-46 territory for Yair Rodriguez. I just think he's much better than Josh Emmett, especially at this point in their careers.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though, if Emmett comes out with this one, that's going to be a sweet one for Dan to hold over our head.
Especially if it's one of those things where he does utilize that wrestling, right? He lands it in the first round. We're looking at each other in the Discord. We're like, oh boy, this is gonna be a long one for a year. So we'll see, man. I mean, look, I think it's there for the taking for Emmett. I have a ton of respect for this man. Just the amount of heart that he has just to push through. It's truly special, man. It really is. And man, if Yair gets the job done, yeah, like we said, Matt, I think that we could see a scenario where Emmett hangs it up, right? I mean, at 38 years old, if he eats his L here, where do you go? You know what I'm saying? So he's a smart guy, and I don't think he wants that CTE later on in life. But yeah, should be a fantastic co-main event.
Yeah, this dude's already setting himself up for retirement. I think he was with Gary V recently for his NFT launch or something like that. He's getting immersed into Web3 a little bit. He's setting himself up for his post-fight career, it looks like. But definitely a great fight, a good interim title fight. I think, whichever one wins, it should be a good matchup for Volk once he comes down off this loss to Islam Makhachev. But, without further ado, let's get right into the main event. The fight in which this card was built around, and that is Alexander Volkanovski, the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC versus Islam Makhachev, right? This is just, Khabib 2.0. We've been hearing it for his entire career, that he is better than Khabib, just as good as him, if not better than him, that he's more well-rounded, that he's more advanced than Khabib was at this point in his career. We've been hearing those things from the Khabib camp, from the coaches. Even DC has mentioned it before. And, it's been easy to cast it away, to kind of brush that off to the side, because he hadn't faced anybody, right? Up until his last fight against Charles Oliveira. He went there against, top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, the guy who was reigning supreme over the lightweights. He beat guys like Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and he, really finished him, made it impactful, kind of proved his point where he stood in the lightweight division. And Islam comes in and just, for lack of better words, dominated Charles Oliveira from start to finish, wound up getting the second round submission over the guy with the most submissions in UFC history. And I can't say enough about how impressive that win was for Islam. And it kind of reinforces all those things you've been hearing about him throughout his career, what his ceiling is, what he's capable of. And I've kind of been trying to view this fight under that light, right? I mean, we're looking at the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world at plus 320 against someone who's in their first title defense. It kind of on paper makes no sense, but, viewing it under that light, I kind of asked you guys this question yesterday. I said, it's not going to be fair to make this point, but I have to make it. If Khabib fought Volkanovski at 155, like, this line would be minus 500 territory. Khabib towards the end of his career was going off minus 350 plus to just about everybody. And, if reviewing Islam in that same light as Khabib, you have to kind of make sense of this line, in that matter. And if he could do what he did against Charles as dominantly as, he did, going up against someone that's 5'6" in Alexander Volkanovski, is 145, a stocky little fella. You can only imagine what he's going to do to him. I think, the three of us kind of lean towards the over in this fight, the over 2.5, over 3.5, over 4.5. Fight goes a distance because, it's a credit to Alexander Volkanovski, just how durable he is. What is he on, a 23 fight win streak in MMA, 12 fight win streak in the UFC? Islam, I believe, is on an 11 fight win streak in his own right. But Volkanovski's just a tough dude. It's really difficult to count him out, in any situation. I just really think this is such an uphill battle for him. And, if anyone could get the job done, I think it's him, but I'm not willing to take a stab at it at plus 320. I really think that Islam just controls his fight from start to finish. He's just way too big for Volkanovski. It's be tough for him to close a distance, especially when he's going to have to worry about the wrestling threat coming back at him. And, these Dagestani fighters, they're a lot smarter than people give them credit for. Islam says he's going to come in here. He doesn't need to wrestle Volkanovski, but we all know the game plan is to come in here, get the takedown, work to get this to the mat, and just control Volk from there. And I don't believe a word that they say when they mention that this can be stand-up. Easiest path to victory always for those guys. And, it's pretty obvious grappling is that path here against Volk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a super, super special moment, right? I mean, you're talking about the #1 pound-for-pound guy going against a guy who has so much potential. I mean, yeah, he's making his first title defense, but man, I mean, Islam, look at the picture of Islam. I mean, he looks like he's half wolf, half human, for crying out loud. This man is truly a very special fighter. And you don't come across fighters of this nature too often, but you got to give credit where credit's due on Volkanovski, right? I mean, he's 12-0 in the UFC, #1 pound for pound. You can regard him as the best featherweight of all time. I think it's either between him or Jose Aldo. Aldo does have 8 title defenses. Volkanovski has 5. So I guess you can make that argument. Personally, I think that Volkanovski is the best featherweight of all time. Just truly just what he's done, just been able to run through guys, the way he ran through Korean Zombie, God, the way he's able to just handle Max Holloway. I mean, it's just, it's special. It's special. And, we did have the pleasure of meeting Volkanovski, super humble guy, great gentleman, absolute pleasure, man, to talk to. And, guy in Islam Makhachev, right? I mean, he's won 11 straight, making his first title defense. That wrestling base is something to behold, man. It's truly special. He's going to go after that takedown 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If he fails, he's going to go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And, just for a little sabermetric for you guys, on Saturday is Islamic Revolution Day, which I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, it's it's a holiday in a country in the Middle East, but I just thought that was kind of funny. But man, I mean, look, Islam Makhachev again is just a very special guy. You look at this number minus 350. We may never see that number ever again in Makhachev's career. I firmly believe that if Makhachev gets the job done versus Volkanovski, he'll go unbeaten for the rest of this decade. Like, I just don't see anyone coming close to this man. I think that he will finish his career as one of the best to ever do it. And it may sound bold now, but like truly, he just has the tools, to be an all-time great in this sport. So, I just think that with the takedowns and the size differential, I gotta favor Makhachev. I have no doubt that Volkanovski is going to come in here with the heart and the resiliency. I have no doubt that he's going to come in here with the strength and power. I mean, the guy used to be a 200+ pound rugby player in Australia. So like, I have no doubt that if he's packing on these pounds and, come fight time, he'll probably be 160, 165 on the Volkanovski side. So, I just think that, man, it's just going to be too tough. The technicality on the Makhachev side, the way he's able to control those hands on the mat with the grappling, it's just going to be too much for Volkanovski. And I do expect that Volkanovski is going to hang in there for a few rounds. I do like the overs as well with you guys. Could potentially see a late, submission on the Makhachev side, but I actually like this fight to go to decision. And I believe that Makhachev is probably going to win a 49-46 here.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on this one. I just think, what makes Volkanovski so dangerous is the fact that, like you mentioned, ex-rugby player, seeing old pictures of him in the rugby uniform, like the guy was like a little fire hydrant, and, dropping in weight, you don't necessarily lose that power. And I think at 145, like that is a huge advantage. And it's part of the reason why, in all his fights against Max Holloway, you saw the difference when they connected. Same thing in his fight with Korean Zombie, same thing in his fight with Ortega. That's a big advantage at 145 to have that kind of power. And I just think that advantage is essentially moot once you move up in weight. And Volkanovski's only loss, I can't remember, I don't know if it was at 170 or 185. It was at a higher weight class, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously that was a long time ago. He's not that fighter, but we have seen glimpses of Volkanovski getting clipped way back when. Powerful guy. The biggest difference here is going to be obviously the strength of Islam. I think it's going to be a power that Volkanovski has not felt before. And everyone that wrestles Islam always says the same thing. And call it what you will. Maybe it's the vitamins that they fed him in Dagestan when he was growing up. But the fact of the matter is that this man is built different. You do not just submit Charles Oliveira. I think there's a reason why this line is where it's at, and I think it's accurate. Oliveira is wild and gets dropped in every fight, and he's he made a name for himself from having these miraculous comebacks. And he tried doing the same thing with Islam, and you're just like, not today. Islam truly is extremely well-rounded, very, very underrated stand-up too. I think the part that just bothers me a lot is people automatically assuming that he's going to finish Volkanovski. Like, this man is the number one pound-for-pound fighter. Like, show some respect and understand that you don't just get that title by just beating everybody. I mean, the guy has been in bad spots and shown the durability to push through. Being balls deep inside of a guillotine and a triangle choke from Brian Ortega, one of the best finishers on the ground in the UFC period. That says a lot. I don't care what round it was. I don't care how tired they were. I mean, that was tight. And you saw the veins popping out of Volkanovski's head. You heard him gurgling. He pushes through. He's the kind of guy that you have to kill to get out of there. He will not tap. He will go unconscious. Now, not to say that if Islam catches that arm triangle, if you can't finish it there, but I think with these smaller, shorter guys, obviously I always talk about like my no neck theory. It's proven accurate time and time again. I think if there's any submission that Volkanovski is going to get caught in, it's going to be some form of arm lock, an arm bar, Kimura, because he does have pretty long arms for a guy his size. He actually has a longer reach than Islam, which is kind of crazy for a guy who's 4 inches shorter. So, yeah, I mean, I think early on, it's going to be a question of, kind of distance management. Volkanovski obviously doesn't want to get into that clinch game and is going to want to use his mobility, stick and move and try to avoid getting pushed up against the fence. But I just think as, the fight progresses, I think we'll see Islam start to sort of figure things out. Similar to what we did with Thiago Moises, who put up a decent fight, but ultimately ended up getting finished in the fourth. I don't think he'll, kind of quit as quickly as Moises did once Islam got that dominant position that he was looking for all fight. I think Volkanovski has too much fight in him to just give up like that. And so, I like Islam to win. I mean, as I mentioned, and as you guys mentioned, I'm going to be targeting all the overs here: 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5 fight to go. And I'll probably sprinkle some Islam decision here. I just think that, and this is why the UFC is so great, right? Because we get to see the top two fighters in the world, fight each other. But with that being said, I see this very much. Volkanovski may be able to steal one round, maybe two, depending on, again, if he can stick to the game plan and not get kind of tied up. But I just think Islam's going to be too big, too strong. And if he lands top position, he's not going to let it go. He will ride out the entire rounds, and he'll be dominant. And I think, again, Volkanovski doesn't really lose anything from losing this fight. So he'll go right back down to 145, keep cleaning house. But you gotta respect the man for going for it. I think if Oliveira was still the champ at 155, we might be singing another tune. I think that's a much more winnable fight for him, but it's just a tough nut to crack here. Makhachev is so well-rounded, so good on the ground. And I think, he's going to be the first guy to control Volkanovski on the ground.
Yeah, and I don't think it's out of the question that Volk will have his moments. I think he will have his moments. He's too good to simply count out like that. And, Dan, you mentioned it. These really are the two best fighters on the UFC roster. Like, I know sometimes
outside of John Jones,
outside from John Jones, who hasn't fought in 3 years, but when you're looking at the rankings, sometimes they're skewed, but these really are number 1 and 2 pound for pound best fighters in the UFC. It's great that we get to watch them match up against each other. It's just like you guys mentioned, we're going to keep beating this drum. Islam is just going to be too strong, too powerful. His control, his grip is just, it could be something that Volk has never felt before. And that's what everyone who fights Islam says, right? But Volk's one tough son of a bitch. He is a fighter through and through. So to count on him getting finished earlier in this fight, I think, you kind of have to reevaluate that thought process if anyone's thinking about that. But just a testament to how great both these fighters are, right? So it's just going to be a great war. Can't wait for it. But Islam, I think, as I mentioned before, is just too big a hill for Volkanovski to climb.
Yeah. And just to add just a different perspective, if Volkanovski can get the job done here, I mean, you got to put this man on a Mount Rushmore. Like, I mean, I'm talking with names of Georges St. Pierre, Anderson Silva-esque. I mean, if he comes in here and either finishes Islam or squeezes out a split decision, I mean, shoot.
You gotta give him his flowers. Definitely gotta give him
I mean, how many fighters? 4 fighters in UFC history have simultaneously held the belts. Held the belts.
The belt. I believe it's.
I think this would be the most impressive, though, out of all of them. Easily the most impressive. I think second most would probably be like DC beating Stipe
or Cejudo. Cejudo's an impressive one too.
Yeah, I mean, not so much though, right? Because he won the second belt against a Dominic Cruz who probably should have been fighting for that belt. Whereas, like Islam is the rightful 155 champ.
Yeah,
and that would just be.
Well, DC was only light heavyweight champ because Bones wasn't there, right?
Fair point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be up there if he pulls it off. I mean, the odds suggest just how big of a upset it would be, and it really would be massive. Great for his career. I know Kev mentioned it. We got the pleasure of meeting Volkanovski backstage at 281. Stand-up guy, really cool, humble person. You could see it in the way he fights, right? It's just that's who he is through and through. His coach, Joe Lopez, awesome guy. He was talking me through the entire Blanchfield meatball fight, one-on-one. Very awesome to pick his mind and just hear from one of the more brilliant coaches in the world. So, I if he pulls it off, I would love to see it. I'm a big Volk fan. I've been beating the Volk drum for years now, and everyone else is still hating on him, saying he lost to Holloway in that second fight. But yeah, it's a great fight here. I can't wait.
Yeah, gonna be a very special moment indeed, boys, and looking forward to witnessing it with you guys.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fight Night 284. As we mentioned in the beginning, make sure you download SoBet with the link in the description below, and let's cash in these bets together on Saturday.
Make it rain, guys. Let's go.